Just a couple of guys dropping nuggets of wisdom as we talk about life, the universe, and, well, everything. Welcome to WizNugs.
Welcome back, everyone, to WizNugs. I'm Casey.
I'm Cisco.
And we're here to drop nuggets of wisdom.
And welcome to our second episode. Hopefully you enjoyed the first, and we'll try to continue on with the entertainment value that was provided in the previous version.
So I got something today that feels really important.
Okay, what were you thinking?
This is a superpower that everybody has that they may not know that they have.
Okay.
I don't believe that I'm overstating it by very much to say that it's a superpower.
All right, like super strength, or is that what we're talking about? We're talking about like...
Kind of.
All right, what were you thinking?
Okay, so just to back up a little bit here, we've got the ability to not turn off pain, but to get through pain easier.
Sure.
We've got the ability to think clearly in the middle of a crisis.
Okay.
We've got the ability to self-regulate heartbeat, adrenaline, cortisol, other stress hormones, that we can actually change that. We can do that.
And so how do we do that exactly?
It all comes down to breathing.
Okay, so elaborate if you could.
When in a crisis, our system has a tendency to, we call it fight or flight.
Okay.
Or freeze.
I've heard that. Yeah, and I've heard that one too.
And what's happening in the brain at this point is the upstairs brain, the prefrontal cortex, where most of the thinking takes place, the resources are just starved from that because they're all reallocated. Because the downstairs brain is handling the threat assessment, the dealing with what to do about it.
So like when you get off like terribly scared or something of that nature, and then you just can't think clearly because the emotional part's taken over.
Exactly. And that's why the instinct of just freezing sometimes in that moment, or, obviously the other two, fighting or
Sure.
running away.
Right.
And this, sorry, so many thoughts.
That's all right. Get them out. Breathe.
All right.
Example.
The idea being that when you're stuck in that mode, when you're stuck in processing some kind of major catastrophe, or even if it just feels like a catastrophe, like when a kid falls down and skins their knee.
Right. Catastrophe to them.
There's no getting through to talking to them, and no amount of saying, calm down. It doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change how they're processing the problem.
Right.
Sometimes even to be able to say what happened and find out from the kid what's going on, it doesn't work because they're just...
And then as a parent, you get frustrated because you're like, what's going on? You need to stop for a minute.
Then you go into crisis mode too, and it can snowball. Or telling the kid, hey, stop crying. We need to talk about this. Stop. That doesn't work either.
Right. Because you're not really reaching them at that logical level.
So at this time, when you're in that crisis mode, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in.
Okay.
And that involves adrenaline, that involves cortisol, other stress hormones, that involves quickening the heartbeat and quickening the breathing, because your body's preparing you to fight or flee.
So would you describe that as being like primal feelings? Is that what that would be?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay.
I've heard it called the lizard brain.
Okay, I've heard that term.
It's that deeper primal instinctual piece of us that if you need a burst of energy to be able to get away from a bear, for example.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing that you need the adrenaline and the cortisol for short bursts to be able to get energy out to your extremities as quickly as possible so you can run or punch or whatever.
Okay.
But most of the problems that we face in modern times do not require that kind of response. In fact, most of them require exactly the opposite.
Right.
That right at that moment when our brains are reallocating resources into the, threat assessment, let's get out of here kind of mode, that's right when we need the think through the problem mode and take the appropriate action, because the appropriate action might not be run away.
Right. I mean, you bring up the idea that we don't really necessarily have the fear of running from a bear or a physical threat. So we start to make things in our regular life that is abnormal become a threat and therefore have that same reaction to something that probably doesn't require that.
Right. Well, exactly. And so then the other, like, now taking this to its next step is that you want to be able to turn that off.
Okay.
But we can't just slow down our heartbeat without, just by thinking about it.
Right.
We can't turn off adrenaline just by thinking about it. And same with any of the other things that we're talking about involved in the parasympathetic nervous system. So in order to get it to stand down, the only thing that we actually have control over is our breathing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And it's the funniest thing because this lizard brain, it's saying that it's the primal kind of core.
Sure.
It's kind of dumb.
It's not as smart as the upper brain is what we're saying, right?
No. Let me go back a step.
Okay.
It's kind of dumb in that it's really easy to fool.
Okay, sure. Okay, I see what you're saying.
That, this is the jump scare in a movie. It's really easy to just trick that part of our brain. And so it's also really easy to hijack it back to what we want it to be. And by slowing down our breathing, our lizard brain takes in the input of our breathing is slowed and says, wait a minute, my breathing is slowed down. That means there's not a threat. Stand down, everybody. Stand down. Back to normal.
So not necessarily tricking it back, but at least controlling it in that sense.
Right.
Right.
So by turning it off, by slowing down the breathing, controlling that, it might take a little bit to get to that spot where you can actually do this on command, because it still takes a little bit of that prefrontal cortex thinking about the situation to be able to turn that on, to be able to remember, I need to just focus on my breathing, slow it down. And by slowing it down, that slows down the heart rate, that slows down the muscle, twitch, that slows down, or not slows down, I guess it turns off the flow of adrenaline and cortisol, and it returns the body back to its normal state, which is the part where we can think better and more clearly.
And this is not just for the extremity of anger or being fearful. I think that might even apply if you're in a very sad state, right? And you start having bad thoughts and you start why, those kind of things. And you're like, if I can breathe and relax and get myself calm, then I can think about this more rationally and not so much emotionally.
Sure. I think in any situation where you need to be able to think clearly, breathing is number one. And you can't just tell somebody, hey, calm down. It doesn't work. Right. And it's really difficult to tell somebody, just stop crying.
I think going back to the calm down thing, if you're in a relationship and you've ever told your partner just to calm down and they're overreacting, that's the worst thing that you could do.
So exactly. So if you're watching this with your partner or your kids or your parents or whatever, you can stop and you can say, hey guys, let's remember, instead of saying calm down or stop that, let's focus on our breathing. And it's not like, hey, I'm trying to control you and you're messed up. It's if we both are controlling our breathing, then we can actually talk and discuss and come to some kind of meeting of the minds at that point.
Right.
It's not about controlling the other person. It's about helping them to control themselves so that you can actually interact with them.
And in a helpful way, right? So yeah, I could probably think of a few times where I've been at the point of being so emotional about a particular thing that I know I wasn't thinking clearly. And at least I had the presence of mind to know that I was not thinking clearly and walked away or did what I needed to do. But I never really thought about the breathing part, right? I think you see it in TV shows and stuff of that nature where you see them, okay, you need you to breathe, we need you to breathe, we need you to relax. And to me, it's that's almost frustrating to me, right?
It can be, for sure.
But realizing that, this actually is a very important thing, right? And it's not just somebody saying it because they want you to be calm. It's a proven method,
right,
to actually get you to be in a better state of mind, if nothing else.
And I've had great success with this myself when I remember to do it. And also what has really, really helped me as a parent is when my kids are freaking out and they've thrown a tantrum or they've fallen off something and hurt themselves, to be able to stop and say, hey, remember, you've got a superpower. What? And to be able to talk them through this, for one, Sometimes I drop WizNugs on my kids to distract them from what they're going through so that they can cool down.
Right.
That works. And sometimes it's reminding them of this, telling them this story to be able to talk through what they're going through. That when, this is another thing, we call that the emotional tunnel. When the lizard brain's taken over, the lights are not on upstairs in the prefrontal cortex. It's barely, it's there, but it's not really functional in a meaningful way.
And we mean tunnel, the idea that you have to get through this in order to get to the other end, right? Okay.
Exactly. That when you're in that state, it's difficult to reach a person in I keep saying in a meaningful way, but I guess that's, for me, it's that concept of being able to discuss something with them, to be able to find out what happened, to be able to find out how they feel about this. What can we do to help? What can we do to fix? Where are you hurt? Where are you hurt? What do you need?
Right.
That you can look and you can visually assess yourself, or like finding out from the person what happened can be really helpful.
Right. Well, that's when communication is such a valid thing. And I know that if I'm in an emotional state, I'm not necessarily communicating at my best level, right? That I am more concerned about however that feeling is at the time, whether it's anger or sadness or fear. I may not really tell you what's wrong until I get to the point that I'm actually a little bit more calm.
Sure. And you may not even be able to process what's going on until you've come out of that state. That's another kind of funny thing. Talking about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, we also know that left brain and right brain process things differently. And right brain typically has more of that emotional content. So that when we're freaking out, when there's something going on, it's that right brain that's like, ah! And the left brain is more the logical list-making side, more or less. And to be able to engage across hemispheres and upstairs to downstairs, like that matters. That's meaningful.
Right.
So that's kind of like phase 2 of all this is once you've calmed down and you're breathing properly and you're able to get that parasympathetic nervous response to just chill out, then you can go back to the situation and you can say, what happened? What is it about the situation that, even just listing the things in order, one by one, what like actually temporally took place? Mm-hmm. You can say, well, first I was at the intersection and the light turned red and I, describing a car accident, for example. To be able to talk through what happened can help us process it and take it out of the realm of a purely emotional response and put it back into something that we can understand.
Now, you said parasympathetic, so what's our normal state of being then?
Strangely enough, it's the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay, and in that, how would you describe that? How is that described? As just being logical, calm?
Not everybody's logical.
Sure.
Most of the time.
Sure.
But I would say that that's kind of like the baseline.
Okay.
The baseline is your sympathetic nervous system's up and running, and it's working, and it's doing its thing.
All right.
Whatever normal looks like for you.
Whatever that normal process is for you. Okay.
But when in extreme stress, or even just, stress, it can activate the parasympathetic, which then it just pulls all those resources away from your normal processes.
So it could even not even be like a immediate event that happens that causes you to have that parasympathetic response. It could be something as simple as that the weight of the world is on you, right? And you're just sitting there working away, doing everyone's, and then that thought comes into your head and it starts making you stress out. And then the next thing you know, you're in panic mode.
It could be anything that triggers like anxiety. I'm not saying that this is a cure-all to like any kind of mental health issues. And your mileage may vary.
But it's a tool in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
To be able to at least start on the path, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have children and you understand how that works, and I know that with my kids, they had moments of hysteria, if you would. Not too bad in general, but I definitely think that information would have been more helpful, right? That's not something I knew beforehand. Like again, things that you hear and you just think it's a TV show, it's a movie. It's part of the script. That's how they wrote it out. But knowing that this is an actual thing, right, that you can actually act upon and do, it is kind of like a superpower.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to share this with. There was a little girl. I was at a birthday party with my daughter, and there was a little girl who fell down and skinned her knee in her swimsuit. It was a pool party, and so she had this, it's a little kid thing. She had a scrape on her knee, and it was bleeding, and she was freaked out of the blood, and she was just like halfway checked out,
Right.
and crying, and I was, trying to help, and I'm just happened to be sitting nearby not where she fell, but where she comes back to the table to, like, her parents take her to the table to cool down, and then they go to get like a first aid kit, and I'm just sitting there with this kid, and I go, "Hey, did you know that you have a superpower?"
And then Dad got her right away
and describe it to her, and she's. It took her a second to kind of click in, but to be able to describe it to her about, did you know that? I know that feels like a big deal right now. Oh my goodness, yeah, falling down can be weird. That can hurt. Like, did you know that if you control your breathing, that you can actually make it hurt less? What, really? And so I go, yeah, try it with me. And did that a couple of times with her, and she chilled so fast and was ready to hop back in the pool before her parents even got back.
But it wasn't like an instantaneous thing, right? It wasn't like she's like panicking and then...
It wasn't one breath. It was 2 or 3, 4.
Sure. Enough to get her to that calm point, right?
It wasn't that long. It wasn't even like 5 minutes. Like I said, I think it was before her parents came back with the first aid kit. It was like she was cooled down about it.
I'm just saying I would creep out if there was like an instantaneous change of emotion, right? From like hysteria to I'm deadpan now, serious.
Completely chill.
Yes, and I am now okay with myself. I think that would be... Yeah, exactly. I think that would like creep me out a little bit. But, me being silly.
Sure. So, we'd like to keep it short, I think.
Yeah, I think it's, the takeaway from this particular episode is we have an ability to mitigate some of our primal fears or our primal responses that we have with breathing. And as silly as that sounds, surprisingly, that is something that actually works.
So try it out. Leave a comment. How did it work for you? Teach your kids. Teach your friends. It's a useful thing. So thanks for visiting.
Yeah, I'm Cisco.
And I'm Casey.
And thanks for joining us on WizNugs. Have a great night.
Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. For more information, head over to mywiznugs.com.